My name is Angel, and welcome to my channel for yet another episode of the 13 Days Till Halloween countdown. For today, episode 2, day 12. 12 days till Halloween. I will be reading you the story of Sleepy Hollow. So, when you're ready, sit back, relax, and join me for today's video. Okay, let's get things started for you today. The Legend of Sleepy Hollow from the sketchbook of Washington Irving. If this is your first time tuning in to the 13 days till Halloween, please like and subscribe to my channel as I put out new videos every Wednesday and a whole lot more in October. Let's get into today's story. So, in the bosoms of one of the most spacious coves which indent the eastern shore of the Hudson at that broad expansion of the river, denominated by the ancient Dutch navigators the Tappan Sea, and where they always prudently shortened sail and implored the protection of Saint Nicholas when they crossed. There lies a small market town or rural port, which by some is called Greensburg, but which is more generally and properly known as Tarrytown. This name was given to it, we are told, in former days, by the good housewives of the adjacent country, from the inveterate propensity of their husbands to linger about the village on tavern market days. Be that as it may, I do not vouch for the fact, but merely advert to it for the sake of being precise and authentic. Not far from the village, perhaps about 3 miles, there is a little valley, or rather lap of land among high hills, which is one of the quietest places in the whole world. A small brook glides through it, with just murmur enough to lull one to repose, and the occasional whistle of a quail or tapping of a woodpecker is almost the only sound that ever breaks Such is the general purport, or this legendary superstition, which has furnished materials for many a wild story in that region of shadows, and the spectre is known at all the country firesides by the name, the Headless Horseman of Sleepy Hollow. It is remarkable that the visionary propensity I have mentioned is not confined to the native inhabitants of the valley, but is unconceivably embedded by everyone who resides there for a time, however wide awake they may have been before they reached the sleepy region. They are sure, in a little time, to inhale the witching influence of the air, and begin to grow imaginative, to dream dreams and see apparitions. I mentioned this peaceful spot with all possible laud, for it is in such little retired Dutch valleys, found here and there embosomed in the great state of New York. The population, manners, and customs remained fixed, while the great torrent of migration and improvement, which is making such incessant changes in other parts of the restless country, sweeps by them unobserved. They are like those little nooks of still water which border a rapid stream, where we may see the straw and bubble riding quietly at anchor, or slowly revolving in their mimic harbor, undisturbed by the rush of the passing current. Though many years have elapsed since I trod the drowsy shades of Sleepy Hollow, yet I question whether I should not still find the same trees and same families vegetating in its sheltered bosom. In this by-place of nature there abode in a remote period of American history, that is to say, some 30 years since, a worthy wight of the name Ichabod Crane, who sojourned, or as he expressed it, tarried in Sleepy Hollow for the purpose of instructing the children of the vicinity. He was a native of Connecticut, a state which supplies the Union with pioneers for the mind, as well as for the forest, and sends forth yearly its legions of frontier woodmen and country schoolmasters. The cognomen of Crane was not implicable to his person. He was tall, but exceedingly lank, with narrow shoulders, long arms and legs, hands that dangled a mile out of his sleeves, feet that might have served for shovels, and his whole frame most loosely hung together. His head was small and flat with the top, with huge ears, large green glassy eyes, and a long snipe nose that looked like a weathercock perched upon his spindle neck, to tell which way the wind blew. To see him striding along the profile of a hill on a windy day, with his clothes bagging and fluttering around him, one might have mistaken him for the genius of famine descending upon the earth, or some scarecrow eloped from a cornfield. His schoolhouse was a low building, one large room, rudely constructed of logs, the windows partly glazed and partly patched with leaves of copybooks. It was most ingeniously secured at vacant hours by a withe twisted in the handle of the door, and stakes set against the window shutters, so that though a thief might get in with perfect ease, he would find some embarrassment in getting out. An idea most probably borrowed by the architect, Jost van Houten, from the mystery of an eel pot. The schoolhouse stood in a rather lonely but pleasant situation, just at the foot of a woody hill with a brook running close by, and formidable birch trees growing at one end of it. joys of the mothers by petting the children, particularly the youngest, and like the lion bold, which Wilson so magnanimously the lamb did hold, he would sit with the child on the knee, and rock and cradle his foot for whole hours together. In addition to his other vocations, he was a singing master of the neighborhood, and picked up many his shoulder, lest he should behold some uncouth being trampling coast behind him. And how often he was thrown into complete dismay by some rushing blast howling among the trees in the idea that it was a galloping Hessian on one of his nightly scourings. All of these, however, were mere terrors of the night, phantoms of the mind that walk in darkness. And though he had seen many spectres in his time, and been more than once beset by Satan in divers shapes and lonely preambulations, yet daylight put an end to all of these evils, and he had passed through his pleasant life of it, in despite of the devil and all his works, if its path had not been crossed by a being that caused more perplexity to mortal man than ghosts, goblins, and a whole race of witches put together. That was a woman. Among the musical disciples who assembled one evening each week to receive his instructions in psalmody was Katrina Van Tassel, the daughter and only child of a substantial Dutch farmer. She was a blooming lass of fresh 18, plump as a partridge, ripe and melting, and rosy-cheeked as one of her farmer's peaches, and universally famed not merely for her beauty but her vast expectations. She was withal a little of a coquette, as might be perceived even in her dress, which was a mixture of ancient and modern fashions, as most suited to set off her charms. She wore the ornaments of pure yellow gold, which her great-grandmother had brought over from Sardam, the tempting stomacher of the olden times, and withal a provokingly short petticoat to display the prettiest foot and ankle in the country around. Ichabod Crane had a soft and foolish heart towards the sex, and it is not to be wondered at that so tempting a morsel soon found favor in his eye, more especially after he had visited her in her paternal mansion. Old Baltus Van Tassel was a perfect picture of a thriving, contented, liberal-hearted farmer. He seldom, it is true, sent either his eyes or thoughts beyond boundaries of his own farm, but within these everything was snug, happy, and well-conditioned. He was satisfied with his wealth, but not proud of it. He'd piked himself up on the hardy abundance rather than the style in which he'd lived. His stronghold was situated on the banks of the Hudson in one of those green, sheltered, fertile nooks in which the Dutch farmers are so fond of nestling. A great elm tree spread its broad branches over it, at the foot of which bubbled up the spring of the softest and sweetest water in a little well formed by a barrel, and then stole sparkling away through the grass to a neighboring brook that babbled along among the alders and dwarf willows. his mind's eye, he pictured to himself every roasting pig running about with a pudding in its belly and an apple in its mouth. The pigeons were snugly put to bed in a comfortable pie and tucked in with the coverlet of crust. The geese were swimming in their own gravy, and the ducks pairing cozily in dishes like snug married couples with a decent competency of onion sauce. In the porkers he saw, carved out of the future, sleek side bacon and shushy relishing ham. Not a turkey, but he beheld daintily trussed up with a gizzard under its wing, and peradventure a necklace of savory sausages. And even bright Chanticleer for himself lay sprawling on his back in a side dish with uplifted claws, as if craving that quarter which his chivalrous spirit disdained to ask while leaving. As the enraptured Ichabod fancied all of this, his eyes rolled his great green eye, and as he rolled his great green eyes over the fat meadow lands, the rich fields of wheat, rye, buckwheat, and Indian corn, and the orchards burdened with ruby fruit, which surrounded the warm tenements of Van Tassel, his heart yearned after the damsel who was to inherit these domains, and his imagination expanded with the idea on how they might readily turned into cash, and the money invested immense tracts of wild lands and shingle palaces in the wilderness. Nay, his busy fancy already realized his hopes, and presented him to the blooming Katrina, with a whole family of children mounted on the top of a wagon, loaded his household trumpery with pots and kettles dangling beneath, and he beheld himself bestriding a pacing mare, with a colt at her heels, setting out for Kentucky, Tennessee, or Lord knows where. When he entered the house, the conquest of his heart was complete. It was one of those spacious farmhouses with high-rided but lowly sloped roofs, built in the style handed down from the first Dutch settlers, the low projecting eaves forming a piazza along the front, capable of being closed up in bad weather. Under this were hung flails, harness, various utensils of husbandry, and nets for fishing in the neighboring river. Benches were built along the sides for summer's use, and a great spinning wheel at one end and churn at the other showed various uses to which the important porch might be devoted. From this, the wonderful Ichabod entered the hall, which formed the center of the mansion, and the place of usual residence. Here rows of resplendent pewter ranged on a long dresser, dazzling his eyes. In one corner, a huge bag of wool ready to be spun, and in another, a quantity of linen was how to gain the affections of the peerless daughter of Van Tassel. In this enterprise, however, he had more real difficulties than generally fell to the lot of knighting a yore, who seldom had anything but giants, enchanters, fiery dragons, and such easily conquered adversaries to contend with, and he had to make his way merely through the gates of iron brass and walls of adamant to the castle keep, where the lady of his heart was confined. All which he achieved as easily as a man would carve his way to the center of a Christmas pie, and then the lady gave him her hand as a matter of course. Ichabod, on the contrary, had to win the way into the heart of the country croquet, beset with a labyrinth of whims and caprices, which were forever presenting new difficulties and impediments, and he had to encounter a host of fearful adversaries of real flesh and blood, and numerous rustic admirers who beset every portal to her heart, keeping a watchful and angry eye upon each other, but ready to fly out in the common cause against any new competitor. Among these, the most formidable was a burly, roaring blade of the name Abraham, or according to the Dutch abbreviation, Brom Bones, the hero of the country road, which rung with his feats of strength and hardihood. He was broad-shouldered and double-jointed, with curly, short black hair, and a bluff but not unpleasant countenance, having a mingled air of fun and arrogance. From his Herculean frame and great powers of limb, he had received the nickname of Brom Bones, by which he was universally known. He was famed for great knowledge and skill in horsemanship, being dexterous on horseback. He was foremost at all races and cockfights, and with the ascendi which bodily strength always acquires in the rustic life, was the umpire in all disputes, setting his hat on one side and giving his decisions with an air and tone that admitted of no gainsay or appeal. He was always ready for either a fight or a frolic, had more mischief and ill will in his composition, and with all his overbearing roughness, there was a strong dash of waggish good humor at the bottom. He had 3 or 4 boon companions of his own stamp, who regarded him as their model, and at the head of whom he scoured the country, ascending every scene of the feud or merriment for miles around. In the cold weather, he was distinguished by a fur cap surrounded with the flauntings foxtail, and when the folks at the country gathering described this well-known crest at a distance, he was whisking around among a squad of hard riders that always stood by for a squall. Sometimes his crew would be heard dashing along past the farmhouses at midnight, with whoop and a halo like a trop of dawn Cossacks, and the old dames, startled out of their sleep, would listen for a moment till the hurry-scurry had clattered by, and then exclaimed, "Hey, there goes Brom Bones and his gang." The neighbors looked upon him with a mixture of awe, admiration, and goodwill. When any mandicap, prank, or rustic brawl occurred within the vicinity, always shook their heads and warranted Brom Bones was at the bottom of it. This ranty bull such was the formidable rival in which whom Ichabod Crane had to contend, and considering all things, a stouter man than he would have shrunk from the competition, and a wiser man, and he would have despaired. He had happily, however, a mixture of pliability and perseverance in his nature. He was in form and spirits like a supple jack, yielding but tough, though he fantasies of the kind. He was dashed away over the brook and seen scampering away up the hollow, full of importance and hurry within his mission. All was now a bustle and hubbub in the late quiet schoolroom. The scholars were hurried through their lessons without stopping at trifles. Those who were nimble skipped over halfway with impunity, and those who were tardy had a smart application now and then into the rear to quicken their speed or help over a tall word. Books were flung aside without being put away on the shelves, inkstands overturned, benches thrown down, and the whole school was turned loose an hour before the usual time, bursting forth like a legion of young imps, yelping and racketing about the green in joy at their early emancipation. The gallant Ichabod now spent at least an extra half an hour at his toilet, brushing and furbishing up his best and indeed only suit of rusty black, and arranging his locks by a bit of broken looking glass that hung up the schoolhouse, that he might make his appearance before his mistress in the true style of a cavalier. He borrowed a horse from the farmer with whom he was domiciliated, a Corlick, old Dutchman of the name Hans Van Ripper, and thus gallantly mounted issued forth like a knight-errant in his quest of adventures. But it is meet I should, in the true spirit of romantic stories, give some account of the look and equipments of our hero and his steed. The animal that he had bestowed was a broken-down plough horse that had outlived almost everything but his viciousness. He was gaunt and shag, with an ewe neck, and had a head like a hammer. His rusty mane and tail were tangled and knotted with burrs. One eye had lost its pupil, and was glaring and spectral, but the other had a gleam of genuine devil in it. Still, he must have had fire and metal in his day, if you were to judge from his name, which was Gunpowder. He had, in fact, been a favorite steed of his master's, the Corlick Van Ripper, who was a furious rider, and had fused, very probably, some of his own spirit into the animal. For old and broken down as he looked, there was more of the lurking devil in him than any young filly in the country. Ichabod was a suitable figure for such a steed, and he rode with short stirrups, which brought his knees nearly to the pommel of the saddle. His sharp elbows stuck out like a grasshopper's. He carried his whip perpendicularly in his hand like a spectre, and as the horse had jogged on, the motion of his arms was not unlike the flapping of a pair of wings. A small wool hat rested on top of his nose, for so his scanty strip of forehead might be called, and the skirts of his black coat fluttered out almost to the horse's tail. Such was the appearance of Ichabod and his steed as they shambled out of the gate, and it was altogether such an apparition as it is seldom to meet in the broad daylight. It was, as I have said, a fine autumn day. The sky was clear and serene, and nature wore that rich and golden livery which we always associate the idea of abundance with. The forests had put on their sober brown and yellow, while some trees of the tendered kind had been nipped by the frosts into the brilliant dyes of orange, purple, and scarlet. Streaming files of wild ducks began to make their appearance high in the air. The bark of a squirrel might be heard from the groves of the beech. changing gradually into a pure apple green, and from that into a deep blue of the mid-heaven. A slanting ray lingered on the woody crests of the precipices that overhung some parts of the dark river, giving deeper, greater depths to the dark gray and purple of their rocky sides. A slope was loitering in the distance, dropping slowly down with the tide, her sail hanging uselessly against the mass, and as the reflection of the sky gleamed along the still water, it seemed as if the vessel was suspended in air. It was toward the evening that Ichabod arrived at the castle of Heer Van Tassel, which he found thronged with pride and flower of the adjacent country. Old farmers, a spare leathered face race, had spun on coats, breeches, blue stockings, huge coats, and magnificent pewter buckles. Their brisk, withered little dames, in close, crimped caps, long-waisted gowns, homespun petticoats with scissor and pin cushions, and gay calico pockets hanging on the outsides. Buxom lasses, almost as antiquated as their mothers, expecting wear a straw hat, a fine ribboned or perhaps white frock, gave symptoms of city innovations. The sons in short, square-skirted coats with rows of stupendous brass buttons, and their hair generally quelled in fashion of the times. Of course, especially if they could procure an eel skin for the purpose, scene of martyring and infested with refugees, cowboys, and all kinds of border chivalry. Just sufficient time had elapsed to enable each storyteller to dress up his tale with a little becoming fiction and in the distinctness of his recollection to make himself the hero of every exploit. Of course, there was the story of Tofu Martling, a large blue-bearded Dutchman who had nearly taken a British frigate with an old iron 9-pounder from a mud breastwork, only that his gun burst at the 6th discharge, as well as an old gentleman who shall be nameless, being too rich to be lightly mentioned, whose battle at the White Plains showed him an excellent master of defense, parried with musket ball with a small sword, in so much that he'd absolutely felt it whiz around the blade and glance off the hilt, in proof that he was ready at any time to show the world, to show the sword. There are several more that had been equally great, not of one who had been persuaded that he had considerable hand in bringing the war happily to termination. But all of these tales were nothing to the tales of ghosts and apparitions that had succeeded. The neighborhood was rich in its legendary treasures of the kind. Local tales and superstitions thrive best in these sheltered, long-settled retreats, but are trampled underfoot by the shifting throngs that form the population of most of our country places. Besides, there is no encouragement for ghosts in most of our villages, for they have scarcely had time to finish their first nap and turn themselves into their graves before their surviving friends have traveled away from the neighborhood. which all men talk in the dark, the countenances of listeners only now and then receiving a casual gleam from the glare of a pipe sunk deep in the mind of Ichabod. He repaid them in kind with large extracts from his invaluable author, Cotton Mather, and added many marvelous events that had taken place in his native state of Connecticut, and fearful sights in which he had seen in his nightly walkabouts in Sleepy Hollow. The revel now gradually broke up. The old farmers had gathered together their families in their wagons, and were heard for some time rattling over along the hollow roads and other distant hills. Some of the damsels mounted on pillions behind their favorite swains, and their light-hearted laughter mingling with the clatter of hoofs echoed along the silent woodlands, sounding fainter and fainter, until they had gradually died away, and the late scene of noise and frolic was all silent and deserted. Ichabod only lingered behind according to the custom of country lovers, to have a deity with the heiress, fully convinced that he was now on his high road to success. What passed at this interview I will not pretend to say, for in fact I do not know. Something, however, I fear me, must have gone wrong, for he certainly sailed forth after no very great interval, with an air quite desolate and chapfallen. Oh, these women! Could that girls have been playing off any of her coquettish tricks? Was her encouragement of the poor pedagogue all a mere sham to secure her conquest of his rival? Heaven only knows, not I. Let it suffice to say, Ichabod stole forth with air, pass this bridge was the severest trial. It was at this identical spot that the unfortunate Andre was captured, and under the covert of those chestnuts and vines were the sturdy yeomen concealed who surprised him. This has ever since been considered a haunted stream, and fearful are the feelings of the schoolboy to pass it alone after dark. As he approached the stream, his heart began to thump. He summoned up, however, all of his resolutions, gave his horse half a score of kicks in the ribs, and attempted to dash briskly across the bridge. But instead of starting forward, the perverse old animal made a lateral movement and ran broadside against the fence. Ichabod, whose fears increased with the delay, jerked the reins on the other side and kicked lustily with the contrary foot, but it was all in vain. His steed started, it is true, but it was only to plunge to the opposite side of the road into a thicket of brambles and alder bushes. The schoolmaster now bestowed both whip and heel upon the starveling ribs of old Gunpowder, who dashed forwards, snuffling and snorting, but came to a stand just by the bridge with a suddenness that nearly sent his rider sprawling over his head. Just at this moment, a flashy tramp by the side of the bridge caught the sensitive ear of Ichabod. In the dark shadows of the grove, on the margin of the brook, he beheld something huge, mishappening, black, and towering. It stirred not, but seemed gathered up in the gloom like a gigantic monster ready to spring upon the traveler. The hair of the affrighted pedagogues rose upon his head with terror. What was to be done? To turn and fly now was too late, and besides, what chance was there of escaping ghost or goblin, if such it was, which could ride upon the wings of the wind? Summoning up, therefore, a show of courage, he demanded in stammering accents, "Who are you? Who are you?" He received no reply. He repeated his demand in a more agitated voice, "Who are you?" Still no answer. Once more he cudgeled the sides of the inflexible Gunpowder, and shutting his eyes broke forth with involuntary fervor into a psalm tune. Just then the shadowy object of alarm put itself in motion, and with a scramble and bound stood at once in the middle of the road. Though the night was dark and dismal, yet the form of the unknown might now in some degree be ascertained. He appeared to be a horseman of large dimensions, and mounted on a black horse of a powerful frame. He made no offer of sociability, but kept aloof on one side of the road, jogging along on the blind side of old Gunpowder. Gunpowder, who had now gotten over his fright and waywardness, Ichabod, who had no relish for this strange midnight companion, and bethought him the self-adventurer of Brom Bones, the galloping Hessian, now quickened in his steed in hopes of leaving him behind. The stranger, however, quickened his horse to an equal pace, and Ichabod pulled up and fell into a walk, thinking to lag behind. The other did the same. His heart began to sink within. He endeavored to resume his psalm tune, but his parched tongue clove to the roof of his mouth, and he could not utter a stave. There was something in the moody and dodged silence of this pertinence companion that was mysterious and appalling. It was soon fearfully accounted for on mounting a rising ground which brought the figure of his fellow traveler in relief against the sky. was set on foot after diligent investigation, and they came upon his traces. In one part of the road leading to the church was found the saddle trampled in the dirt, the tracks of horses' hooves deeply dented in the road, and evidently at furious speeds were traced to the bridge, beyond which, on the bank of a broad part of the brook, where the water ran deep and black, was found the hat of the unfortunate Ichabod, and close behind it a shattered pumpkin. The brook was searched, but the body of the schoolmaster was not discovered. Hans Van Ripper, as executor of his estate, examined the bundle which contained all his worldly effects. This consisted of 2 shirts and a half, 2 stocks for the neck, a pair or 2 of worsened stockings, an old pair of corduroy small clothes, a rusty razor, a book of psalm tunes full of dog's ears, and a broken pitch pipe. As to the books and furniture of the schoolhouse, they belonged to the community, excepting Cotton Mather's History of Witchcraft, a New England almanac, and a book of dreams and fortune-telling, in which last was a sheet of foolscap, much scribbled and blotted by several fruitless attempts to make a copy of verses in honor of the heiress of Van Tassel. These magic books and poetic scroll were forthwith consigned to the flames by Hans Van Ripper, who from that time forward determined to send his children no more to school, observing that he never knew any good would come of reading and writing. Whatever money the schoolmaster had possessed, and he had received his quarter's pay but a day or 2 before, he must have had his person at the time on his disappearance. The mysterious event caused much speculation at the church on the following Sunday. Knots of geezers and gossips were collected in the churchyard, at the bridge, and at the spot where the hat and pumpkin had been found. The story of Brower and Bones, and the whole budget of others, were called to mind, and when they had diligently considered them all and compared them with the symptoms of the present case, they shook their heads, and come to the conclusion that Ichabod had been carried off by the galloping Hessian. As he was a bachelor, and in no one's debt, no one troubled his head any more about him. The school was removed to a different quarter of the hollow, and another pedagogue resigned, took his steed. It is true, an old farmer who had been down to New York on a visit several years after, and from whom this account of the ghostly adventure was received, brought home the intelligence that Ichabod Crane was in fact still alive, that he had left the neighboring party through fear of the goblin and Hans Van Ripper, and partly in mortification at having been suddenly dismissed by the heiress, that he had changed his quarters to a distant part of the country, and kept school and studied at law the same